The Iranian regime wanted to start a war of terror against the entire world. And now the United States is officially making them pay for it. For weeks, the desperate Islamic Republic has waged a ruthless, cowardly campaign bombing apartment buildings and attacking innocent cargo ships just to try and force the West into a ceasefire. But America is no longer holding back. In a massive act of direct retribution, American bombers just completely vaporized a multi-billion-dollar Iranian bridge used to transport enemy weapons, collapsing the entire structure into dust. The ultimate payback has begun, and our story starts with how the Iranian regime expanded this war into something they cannot deal with. So, we have footage from the day one of this war. While the US was striking military targets inside Iran, Iran started going after apartment buildings in Gulf countries like Bahrain on the very first day. Take a look. Now, this was despite the fact that Bahrain, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, UAE, all of them said that the US cannot use their bases or airspace to attack Iran. In fact, for many of these countries, that condition is still true to this very day, 1 month into the war. But despite all this, Iran attacked them anyway. And Iran didn't just attack US bases in these countries, Iran started going after civilian buildings, airports, ports, and of course, tankers. Because you see, Iranian terrorism wasn't just limited to Gulf countries. They also expanded it to international waterways. They started targeting civilian cargo ships and civilian tankers in the Strait of Hormuz, a choke point that's not under Iranian jurisdiction at all. It's considered international waterway that every country has an equal right to go through. Now, footage on your screen is from Thai sailors who were trying to cross back out of the strait. They were stuck in the Arabian Gulf, probably running out of food and supplies, so they were trying to get back home. And they were struck trying to leave Thailand. They are from Thailand, a country that has nothing to do with this war, and despite that, Iranian Navy, IRGC Navy, continues to target them. Now, of course, you guys can argue that Iran has no other choice. The Iranian military cannot match the US military. That might actually be a fair argument, but that doesn't change the fact that the Iranian military is going after civilian targets. And that has a word for it. That's called terrorism. Doesn't matter the reason behind terrorism, it's terrorism nonetheless. And on top of it, it's also important to point out that because of these Iranian attacks on civilians, the war is now expanding into something Iran did not expect. Just yesterday, President Trump tweeted this out. The biggest bridge in Iran has come tumbling down, never to be used again. It is time for Iran to make a deal before it is too late, before there's nothing left. Now, of course, we want to look at every side of the story. There are people online who are arguing if this is a legal attack or not. Now, there are lawyers who are saying it's legal, there are lawyers who are saying it's illegal. And I'm not an international lawyer. I'm not any type of lawyer, so my opinion would be pretty much useless in this debate. But what I do know is that bridges have always been a military target in any conflict. In fact, in February of 2022, inside of Ukraine, Ukrainians blew up their own bridges to stop the Russian advance. And then months later, when Ukrainians started their own counteroffensive, Russia blew up bridges during the counteroffensive, so they have enough time to flee back to safety. Armies have been destroying bridges since bridges were invented. And this wasn't just any bridge inside Iran. This was one of the most important ones. According to US officials, it was being used by Iranian armed forces to move missiles and missile parts from Tehran to launch sites in western Iran. But on the other side, we have Iran claiming that the bridge was still under construction, which is creating a new debate, where people are saying that how could military be using the bridge if it was still under construction? But this is where it seems the problem for this whole debate actually starts with how Iranians were operating the bridge. The bridge was publicly supposed to be open for the public to use last year, but they said it was still under construction, that's why they couldn't open it. Then, same thing happened a few months ago where they said it's still under construction, so the public couldn't open it, or the public couldn't use it. But all this time, the military was using the bridge that was supposedly still under construction. Here we have a former YouTuber, 2CTV, explaining this a lot better than me. Take a listen.
This bridge, B1, was not part of Iran's heritage. This was a new bridge, newly built bridge that wasn't even open. And there are two reasons this was hit. They were supposed to be opening it officially to traffic earlier in the year. Well, technically it was supposed to be 2 years ago, last year, whatever. And then it was delayed because obviously the Islamic socialist economic policies are not really that competent. And then it was delayed again. It was supposed to be open 2 months ago, and it wasn't still ready, as you can also see in this image. It was not complete anyway, but they made it sound, on the mainstream media, they made it sound like this was a bridge that was active, traffic flowing, and randomly innocent civilians were getting hit by the Americans and the Israelis. This is a war crime. Calm down. The reason this was hit was actually because it wasn't officially open. So symbolically, this was part of that we're going to hit your infrastructure, but we're going to hit something that's not actually open. Secondly, this was still important when it comes to logistics going forward, because while this wasn't open to the public, it was open to the IRGC. So the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps over the last few weeks were using the B1 bridge to transport military equipment between Karaj and Tehran. So that was happening. So the logistics has been cut between the two cities, Karaj and Tehran.
Now let's talk about another problem that actually starts from the United States. During his April 1st address, President Trump publicly said that the US is getting ready to bomb Iran into the Stone Ages. Take a listen, and then I'll explain why this is problematic language.
It made clear from the beginning of Operation Epic Fury that we will continue until our objectives are fully achieved. Thanks to the progress we've made, I can say tonight that we are on track to complete all of America's military objectives shortly, very shortly. We're going to hit them extremely hard over the next 2 to 3 weeks. We're going to bring them back to the Stone Ages where they belong. In the meantime, discussions are ongoing. Regime change was not our goal. We never said regime change, but regime change has occurred because of all of their original leaders' death. They're all dead. The new group.
You see a strike on the bridge? That's legal because it is a military target. But language like this that the President Trump just used just fuels people who are against this war, and it gives fuel to the Iranian state TV. It lets them frame this as America wanting to hurt Iranian civilians, not just the regime. And that's an easy narrative win for the other side. Now, it is important to clarify, the US has not purposefully targeted any civilian target inside of Iran. But nonetheless, language like this doesn't help. Now, although all this is happening, Iran is actually committing actual war crimes that are still continuing inside the country. Now, before we talk about that, just a quick reminder to hit the like and subscribe button down below. It really does help us out, especially when we're talking about Iranian terrorism and war crimes. YouTube's AI algorithm just looks for these words, and when it hears it, it just restricts the video because it thinks it's not advertiser friendly. So your support really does help us out tremendously. But let's focus on the news. Iran has started recruiting 12-year-olds into military campaigns led by the IRGC. Amnesty International has laid out in no uncertain term that this is a war crime that the Iranian regime is committing. It's illegal by any sort of UN law you want to go through. I'm sure there are no international lawyers debating over this. And on top of this, the executions are continuing every single day. Just yesterday, Iran executed an 18-year-old boy who took part in January protest. He's the 9th prisoner to be executed since this war began, roughly a month ago. I hope people are realizing how bad this is. Someone who's 18-year-old right now was likely born in 2007, maybe 2008. That means his whole life was like in front of him, and the Iranian regime is executing him all because he took part in a protest that was at the beginning was an economic protest. People were protesting against Iranian government's mismanagement. Even the Iranian president himself admitted to this on national television. But despite that, the regime is just executing anyone who's against the Islamic Republic. And guess what? They're also going after lawyers who are speaking out against what's happening. Take a look at this report. Iran just arrested a human rights lawyer who was defending people that were being arrested and executed by the regime without proper trials. That means anyone who's now speaking out against the injustice is becoming a target in the country that's so afraid of protests restarting. And all the while this is happening inside Iran, outside of Iran, the war crimes are continuing. Iran is now openly targeting desalination plants in Kuwait. Kuwait is a country that gets around 90% of its drinking water from these desalination plants. That means these attacks are literally existential for Kuwaiti population. I can't even imagine Iran's excuse for going after drinking water like this. Maybe they're trying to rationalize this somehow, saying US soldiers who are on Kuwaiti bases probably drink the water, the same water as Kuwaiti civilians, so from Iranian point of view, it's a military target. Using that logic, they're justifying anything. But unfortunately, it seems even Iran is afraid to admit that they're going after water. This is basically something every human needs. And that's why Iran is now blaming this on other countries. This recent attack, Iran said it wasn't the Iranian forces that carried it out. It was Israel who attacked the Kuwaiti desalination plant. And this has been their trend for last few weeks. Every time they carry out an attack that's indefensible, they just blame it on the United States or Israel. But the world can see what Iran is doing. The world can see what the regime is doing. And now we even have Kuwaiti civilians who are speaking out against Iran. And that's very important because if the civilian population turns against Iran, that gives the government of these Gulf countries a reason to get involved. That's one of the big part behind why these Gulf countries are not striking Iran, is because a big part of the Muslim population in a lot of these countries is sympathetic to Iran, especially since it's fighting Israel. And almost every Gulf country is not a big fan of Israel. So that's why they have stayed out, because they don't want to seem like they're fighting with Israel against another Muslim country, and that could create, internal problems for a lot of these monarchies. But it seems because of Iranian terrorist attacks, that might change very soon. Just yesterday, we had an Emirati military official say publicly that UAE is about to get involved in this war, that decision is coming very soon. Take a listen.
The military get involved in what the US and Israel are currently doing. Is that a stance that the military could take?
As we iterated earlier, that we're not part of this conflict. We just got aggressed by the Iranians. So we will continue that posture in defending our territory, along with our international partners and close allies and also GCC members.
Is that option off the table though?
To be part of that conflict? Not necessarily, but the UAE preserve its right to self-defense upon any aggression that aims at the UAE. And that's the primary role of the military and the armed.
On top of that, this is a UAE military official, and he emphasized once again that even more than a month into this war, after UAE has fought back thousands of missiles and drones from Iran, the UAE government still hasn't given permission to the United States to use Emirati bases or Emirati airspace to attack Iran. But despite this, Iran keeps attacking, and they're not just going after US bases, they are going after civilian targets in all these countries. Take a listen.
I want to get your response to what Iran's foreign ministry had said. They had suggested that US attacks inside Iran were coming from bases within the UAE, and that's why they have subsequently targeted the UAE in response. Is the military in the UAE allowing the US to use its military bases here to attack Iran?
I think the UAE government were really clear from the beginning of the conflict that UAE territory will not be used for any attacks against Iran, and will continue to do so. So from a military standpoint, that's not correct, and it's not happening.
Now, to understand why Iran is behaving the way it's behaving right now, we have to go back and look at how Iran got to where it is today. That doesn't just mean going back to 1979 when the Islamic Revolution took place. In fact, we have to go further back to when the Qajar dynasty was ruling Iran in the 19th century and look at how the decisions the ruling class made back then still affects Iran to this very day. Well, guess what? That's exactly what we're doing in our multi-part podcast that just came out today. So if you're someone who is interested in the history of Iran and how we got to where we are today, definitely go check it out. You can watch it by clicking the links in the description, or you can just watch it by clicking the end screen on your screen, basically clicking the video that's on your screen.